What's the program without my picture? Um, this is a hobby. This isn't just some life's mission type of thing. And I don't really look at it like that. I got on the radio 30 years ago to promote my business as I was coming into town from Tulsa. And I fell in love with it. My plan was only to be on the air for maybe a couple of years to help build the practice, which K-Talk built the practice for me. I appreciate that. We've expanded out quite a bit from that. But it's just been a roller coaster ride, lots of fun ever since. I had a 3-year hiatus there from 2015 to 2018 while I was doing podcasting seriously. And I just had to get back on in 2018 because I couldn't sit by seeing the events that were going on this planet without getting back on the air. It was during Trump's first term, and I have been on there ever since. So for those of you who might just be tuning in by invitation, or you accidentally found the program, because a lot of people just accidentally find the program, I am what is known as a NUCA doctor, stands for National Upper Cervical Chiropractic Association. My job is to bring the spine back into structural balance. And so I just saw somebody I want to mention here who had a traumatic brain injury that brought on migraines and fibromyalgia, coupled with some poisoning related to their career and poisoning through the skin, involved with solvents that they weren't adequately protected from by their own choice. It wasn't an industry thing. It was the industry said, wear gloves, wear masks, and wear goggles. So there was some poisoning of his liver, as well as a traumatic brain injury that resulted from a terrible accident. And I just want to report he's back up on his feet. He's back to work. The migraines are gone. The fibromyalgia is gone. These are not problems in and of themselves. Migraines, back pain, sciatica, stiffness, pain in the neck when you try to turn your head. These are not all original organic type problems. They're all symptoms of an underlying problem of the spine out of balance against gravity. And when gravity is not pulling on your spine equally, from side to side, your body is going to shift into a pattern that tries to hold itself up against the collapsing power of gravity. And muscles are going to get tight. Joints are going to get stiff. And you're going to hurt until that spine is restored to its proper balance point, which brings the shoulders level, the hips untwist, the shoulders untwist, the head comes back up to the vertical, and the pains just disappear. If that sounds like you, the consultation with me is absolutely free and could take a half an hour. If you decide you want me to take care of you, I will. If you don't, we'll still be friends. You can go on your way and do whatever it is you want to do. But you have to schedule it through the office. So you would call 801-523-1890, 801-523-1890 to set aside a time where we could get together and talk. And as I said, there is no charge for that. All right, now I want to get into the program. I guess you know that our entire congressional delegation and our 2 illustrious senators have voted to turn the U.S. military over to Israel in this combined fiscal year National Defense Authorization Act. What makes this U.S.-Israel military merger arrangement unique is that this is the first time such an arrangement has been maintained by law or mandated by law. I mentioned that a little bit yesterday when we were dealing with World War II and as far as the Allied forces were concerned, General Eisenhower was in charge of the Allied forces in Europe. But that was by arrangement, not by congressional mandate. So, and I was quoting yesterday from the Middle East Eye, words to this effect, that the U.S. government has certainly engaged with other allies, particularly the UK and Australia, to expand defense cooperation and joint research, but never under a congressional mandate. Now, why would that be necessary? Why would we need to have Congress make a law that combines our forces with Israel, who is of no advantage to us whatsoever? In fact, Israel's a terrible thorn in our side. And we're losing fighting people because of this. Now, Josh Paul, who I quoted yesterday, a former State Department official who resigned in October of 23 because he just couldn't support Biden's assault on Gaza. And I said that the way I wanted to, Biden's assault on Gaza, through the proxy of Israel. He said if this was something that the U.S. government wanted to do, or U.S. industry wanted to do, it could already be doing it. There's no law against it. And what you have here is essentially a political decision to require it and to identify Israeli technologies to build U.S. platforms. So why would you have to require it by law rather than just the way it's been going along anyway? Because the U.S. wants to pull out of this. Trump realizes what a horrible mistake this has been. He was told by the knuckleheads that were the closest to him in the Oval Office, as well as the Pentagon, this will be over with in 4 or 5 days. Just go in there and pound the hell out of the the Iranians, kill their supreme leader and a bunch of others, scores of others, kill his family, kill his grandchild, and then all of the Iranians will come out on the street thanking the United States for having done so. And of course, that totally backfired. And now Iran is stronger and more resolute than ever to fight the battle, which they have won. How can I say that Iran has won? Because they control the Strait of Hormuz. That's why. And the El Mandab at the bottom of the Red Sea is now under Yemeni control, and they won. Now, Yvonne Ingraham, a retired U.S. Marine Corps Special Operations Officer, told the Middle East Eye that Washington will probably bear the weight of further war crimes committed by Israel side by side with American troops as they invade Iran, which would be the most stupid thing that could possibly happen. So, with that in mind, I want to zip along here into some other ideas. Iranian officials are treating this July 25th Ukrainian attack on Iranian vessels as unprovoked, and are warning the Kyiv regime that Iran will respond. Now, if you're trying to understand Iran's position in this and Ukraine's position, yesterday when I mentioned this, I thought that materials were coming from Russia to Iran. It looks like this ship was carrying armament from Iran to Russia. And you would think Ukraine would have every right to interrupt the flow of weapons into Russia from Iran if they were going to be used against Ukrainian troops. The Iranian foreign ambassador Agachi, speaking on telephone to his Russian counterpart Lavrov this morning, among other things, he called for thwarting the regime, the Kyiv regime's reckless actions, referring to the Ukrainian attacks on Iran. Agachi said that he thanked the Astrakhan authorities for providing assistance to the crew of the attacked vessel and stressed the need to put a stop to such reckless actions. Now, of course, Iran has already threatened Ukraine now that they're going to respond. Don't know if they're as fast as Russia is to respond to an attack. Of course, I say that with tongue in cheek. But he said that Agachi now said that the Ukrainian government has to be held accountable for this attack and to bring those who ordered it and carried out the strike against them to justice. He emphasized that the Islamic Republic of Iran will firmly defend its national security and interests and will not leave, not leave unanswered any aggressions against the lives and the property of its citizens. And then the Khorramshahr missile can easily reach Kyiv from Iran, and they just reminded them of that. He said Ukraine will probably soon realize that Iran will not leave actions against it without a response. So Zelensky said, I'm going to instruct our intelligence to share with our partners the information we have regarding Russia's new assistance to the Iranian regime. Since the beginning of July, we recorded active Russian satellite surveillance of the Gulf states. These images subsequently appear in Iran. And at the same time, there's clear correlation between Russia's satellite imagery of these sites and Iranian strikes, both before the attacks, in preparation for them, and afterward to assess the damage inflicted. Then he said on July 19 and 20, 4 air bases fell within the area of interests of Russian satellites, 2 in Bahrain, 1 in Jordan, 1 in Kuwait. The 2 wars have officially merged. Now that's the point I was trying to get to. Would there be a merging of the U.S. and NATO, which is essentially the U.S. against Russia, and Israel and the U.S. against Iran? Well, Yaroslav Promofov, the chief foreign affairs correspondent of the Wall Street Journal, said just yesterday on X, the 2 wars have officially merged. Iran says a Ukrainian drone attack on its ship in the Caspian has killed a sailor. Ukraine earlier said it was targeting vessels ferrying arms between Russia and Iran on the Caspian Sea. Part of the merging of the conflicts is Zelensky's claim that Ukraine targeted a ship transporting Iranian military items to Russia. And we know that Iran has thousands and thousands and thousands of these drones that they have been building and upgrading since the revolution 47 years ago. And they have been building missiles. And they have been building underground storage because they knew what was coming. So anyway, the overall strategic picture kind of remains the way I've been talking about it. The guns of August, and I'm not trying to scare anybody. And if you're frightened, if you're scared, maybe it's because you're not up on what's going on. Nothing fuels fear and panic and worry more than ignorance. And there are ways to get out of an ignorant state. And that's to study, to expand the borders of your knowledge. And an interesting irony to all of that, as Paul Toscano used to say on our Philosophical Friday show, the further you expand the borders of your knowledge, the more you become aware of the borders of your ignorance. And why you need to keep researching, archiving, writing, journaling, meditating, studying, doing anything you can to get out of an ignorant slump that just fuels your fear. You don't need to be afraid. You might want to get active. You might want to get involved and find out what AIPAC, the Israeli lobby, has on our congressional representation. What do they have on Curtis? What do they have on Lee? What do they have on the other 4 members of the House? That they would vote to turn the sovereignty of America's forces over to a partnership with Israel. So I was quoting General Kujat yesterday from a high official in the German military in the past, warning of the situation as such a frightening, not coincidence, but a frightening similarity to what was going on in August of 1914, when World War I was actually getting underway to the point that by the middle of August of 1914, there was no way to stop World War I from happening. Now, nothing fundamentally has changed from 1914 till now between these two wars joining hands, except now we have nuclear devices. And so with the day-to-day vacillations that are going on, as President Trump recently has said, if Iran doesn't surrender, we're going to pound the living daylights out of them, and that they're begging for a meeting, they're begging for diplomatic meetings so that they can talk to us. And when you read the Iranian side of the story, they said that's absolute BS. They have no intention whatsoever of sitting down and talking with the United States. That if the United States wants to do something to slow down this aggression, get the hell out of the Middle East. So, having said that, it is the case that the United States has stalled for 3 nights in a row now any more attacks on Iran. And there is a lot of speculation about what the reasons are for that. There have been several articles in various media that the U.S. munitions are running out. We've run out of missile defense systems. That's why we can't defend our bases. That's why we can't defend the attacks on Kuwait. We can't defend the attacks on Jordan. We can't defend the attacks on Qatar because there's no defense missiles left. Various systems have simply been run down. Radar systems have been taken out and have not been rebuilt. And so the United States has but when you listen to Mike Waltz, our ambassador to the UN, was asked this about a journalist, are we really running out of bullets? Waltz said, absolutely not. He said the United States has everything it needs to resume the bombing. Interesting thing to say at the same time, Netanyahu is now meeting with Trump. The last time Netanyahu was in the White House meeting with Trump, or at Mar-a-Lago, I don't remember which, the second attack on Iran began. The heavy bombing. And then, of course, Iran's response to all the U.S. bases, to the U.S. defense facilities, and heavy missiling of Israel. Now, is Netanyahu there to get the third war going? The first war started February 28th. Then after a while, there was a ceasefire, a pause in the war. And then the second one got started when Netanyahu went to Washington saying, hey, what are you doing? Get back out there on the front lines. Start bombing. Bomb these people into submission. And then we did for a while, and then we stopped. The MOU showed up. There was some missiling going back and forth a little bit. But now we've had 3 days of silence. Nobody's missiling anybody. And so Netanyahu's back in Washington again. And so Mike Waltz said, the United States has everything it needs to resume the bombing. He said Trump has just decided to pause the attacks to allow more time for diplomacy. Now, that might satisfy some people, but if you look into this far enough, you realize the Iranians are not looking at a diplomatic end to this unless they want to follow the MOU. And number 1 and number 2 points of the MOU is Israel to get out of Lebanon, to get out of Syria, but principally Lebanon. And point 5 is that Iran will have total control of the Strait of Hormuz. And so Iran is saying, you want to get back to diplomacy? Get back to the MOU that you wrote. Otherwise, get the hell out of the Middle East. So Trump himself has said that the United States has everything they need. I just saw that this morning on a news blip where he's on Air Force One. I don't know how old the information was. But he said, no, we have everything. We have everything we need to resume. And then Mike Waltz, when the journalist questioned his answer for a clarification of the answer, Waltz, our secretary, our ambassador to the United Nations, threatened to put people who are questioning the availability of weapons for the United States in jail. Our ambassador to the United States told this reporter, if anybody who questions our ability for a military response should be put in jail. Now, that's not exactly a sovereign answer from a sovereign nation. And it seems that indeed the running down of stocks of various missile systems, as well as naturally the overall pressure by many forces on this planet, warning of a depression, not a recession, but a depression of the world economy if the blockage of that strait continues. And now the El Mandab at the end of the Red Sea. Now, Saudi, I don't know that if they did this knowing that there could be potentially problems with Iran, they built an oil pipeline all the way across Saudi from their eastern refining plants to the western border of Saudi on the Red Sea, where I read a report, it was last night or this morning, that 80% of what they're shipping out of the Persian Gulf, they can ship out of the Red Sea. They only lose 20% by pumping millions of barrels of oil a day through that pipeline. I don't know how big that pipeline is, but it would have to be pretty big. But then, if the Yemenis, with the help of the Iranians, block at the end, the bottom end of the Red Sea, at the El Mandab Strait, the only way out is through the Suez Canal to the north. And traffic on the Suez Canal does not move as fast as it does through the ocean. So for sure, the protest that is going on behind the Gulf cooperation countries, whose infrastructure, even their desalination plants, have been attacked, which is a war crime, thereby threatening the basis for the very existence of the GCC. And then there's reports that the damage to the U.S. bases in these countries is far, far worse than they're admitting. The runways have been taken out, the hangars, the storage areas for our aircraft have been taken out, the fuel dumps have been taken out. And then there are reports that it seems that we're abandoning these bases. Now that, however, does not diminish the danger as such, because there are still these insane voices. And I was listening to them on national news this morning before the radio show, calling for a ground invasion through Kuwait, which according to all experts is practically suicide. Because even if there are 50,000 U.S. troops in that region, only about 8,000 of them are what would be considered combat troops, mostly Marines and the 101st Airborne. And all the others are just logistical support and various other functions. And it would for sure be an extremely bloody affair with many body bags coming back home very soon if this were to occur, given the fact that the Iranians have been preparing for this for decades. They don't just have thousands, according to the best military experts, of drones hiding in the mountains on the western border that are designed to reach Israel, designed to reach American bases. They can also be used against the landing force. Now, I want to give you a picture here, and I'm not happy about this, but this is how my brain works. I try to use history I look at the historical facts that have taken place that might have a direct bearing on what's going on. And I look at D-Day, and there have been some great movies on D-Day. The Tom Hanks one and the John Wayne one earlier, The Longest Day, that talk about all of the logistical support that was coming together. The Tom Hanks one, of course, started with the landing in Normandy. And the only way, one of the things that delayed D-Day for a year was the strength of the German defense forces on the French shoreline, and the embattlements and the bunkers and the huge guns and everything hiding under reinforced concrete that the Germans had been building for several years, because they knew this was coming. They knew eventually the Allied forces would have to land on the mainland of Europe. And we, meaning the Allied forces, tried bombing these emplacements, but due to the accuracy of the German flak guns, they could shoot down these planes before they could empty their belly of bombs. So until a device was invented that would allow much higher altitude bombing, D-Day could never occur. And so, with the development of the Norden bomb sight, that Dr. Royal Lee, the developer of standard process products, made possible because of his invention of an accelerometer that would allow airplanes from 20,000 feet to hit these emplacements on the French shore of the German guns. And after several weeks of that bombing, they were reduced to a certain level of efficiency that made D-Day possible, but it was still a gamble. Now, bring that up to 2026. The only way D-Day worked is because of the tremendous number of soldiers and Marines and airmen and whoever, Navy and everybody else that was involved, so that we had, I forget the number, but I think it was in excess of 20,000 who died that morning on the attack on Normandy. But the numbers of people who came in after that, thousands upon thousands, tens of thousands upon tens of thousands, is what followed Normandy's invasion, and all of the logistical support that came in behind it to make things possible all the way up until March and April of 1945, where the tide finally turned. And then, of course, the Russians taking Berlin, and then it was all over with. Now, bring that up to date now. They talk about 50,000 U.S. troops in the Middle East, most of them, I believe, in Kuwait, because the U.S. bases that have been attacked by Iran continue to be attacked by Iran. So that's Iran's way of telling the U.S., get out of here. And so that with 8,000, not battle hardened, but 8,000 combat troops, supported by another 42,000 logistical support, against drones. Some of the German guns were able to take out landing craft up to a quarter of a mile offshore of Omaha. Off of Omaha was worse than Utah. But now they have drones. And they have drones for every single combat troop. I can't think of anything more insane than the idea of a ground invasion against hidden weaponry that will be made visible the minute the invasion takes place. And so, coupled with land invasion, is the talk of taking out the nuclear facilities of Iran. And the only way they can do that is with a tactical nuke, because these things are 100 meters underground in hardened, not hardened, solid granite. Like some of these mountains to the east of us, on the Wasatch Front and the Wasatch back. A lot of it is shale, a lot of it's limestone, but a lot of it's granitic rock that's very hard. And such an attack could come either from Israel or the United States. But right now, it's a great big if, because I think there's some people in the Pentagon and other sources who are finally getting to President Trump saying, listen, stop it and get out now. Now, what is for sure, as I was saying earlier, is the expansion of the war theater to the Red Sea and the Bab el-Mandeb Strait leading to the Red Sea and the Suez Canal, which has been basically hit because of the Saudi attack on the airport at Sana'a, trying to hit the delegation which attended the funeral in Iran for Ali Khamenei. And then the Houthis attacked Saudi oil tankers in response, and then basically closing more or less the strait. So the Strait of Hormuz and the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb are closed. And it has led to, the ship insurers who are signaling clearly, like Lloyd's of London, they're no longer willing to insure Saudi ships. This was announced by Lloyd's of London last Friday, that all the ships which have anything to do with Saudi Arabia will no longer be insured. But in Saudi Arabia, which up to this point could compensate its losses because of the closing of Hormuz by increasing the oil export, as I was talking about, via pipeline, with the big oil fields in the east of Saudi Arabia to the Red Sea, so that they could still export, to repeat myself, 5 to 7 million barrels of oil a day before the outbreak of the war. So yesterday, the Houthis announced a blockade of Saudi Arabia. So this situation is definitely heating up. And then naturally the situation in the region in general is becoming pretty untenable, because if you look at the dependency of some of the Gulf cooperation countries on desalination, I think Qatar is the worst off, with 77% of its water dependent on such desalination plants, and others a little bit less than 77%. But here you are in 120 degree heat during the day, 105 to 110 at night. If you're not in air-conditioned facilities, you can't survive. And before air conditioning, there was nobody there, except some nomadic peoples hanging around an oasis somewhere. Now, with that, it's up in the air. This is not stable at all. And then, as I talked about, the Ukrainians attacking a cargo ship of Iran in the Caspian Sea, and Tehran is now accusing Zelensky of seeking to track Europe into a war with Russia, to bring Iran into the war. Iran is saying that they did that at the behest of Israel, because supposedly this ship was transporting military cargo. So Agrachi called Kaja Kallas, the boss of Zelensky, to complain, and then demanding that the Ukrainian ambassador report to the foreign ministry in Tehran, which they haven't done. Just Zelensky's threats. So this thing remains extremely hot. And then another thing I wanted to add, because I like bringing Germany into this, because Germany was at one time the heartbeat of European productivity. And when Germany's productive output was good, all the other countries that had trade relationships with Germany, supporting the auto industry principally, and farm machinery next, they all did well. Now, in the German news yesterday, and there's English translations, of course, you would think that neither the Middle East exists or that Ukraine exists, because the only topics were two. One was the murder of somebody participating in the Christopher Street Day parade in Berlin, where at 10 o'clock in the evening, a car drives into the wooded area of Tiergarten, which is close to Brandenburg Gate, and one woman was killed. I think 18 were injured, some of them severely, and this was supposedly done by a 21-year-old Muslim Islamist who subsequently fled, was hiding in some garden area everywhere, which Berlin is full of. And police tracked him down. Supposedly he tried to attack the police with a knife, and then he was shot dead. So he's now dead, obviously cannot be questioned. And then, obviously a huge drama, because the Christopher Street Day Parade, if you don't know what this is a collection, one of the largest collections of the largest population of perverted people in Berlin. I don't know what else to call them. If you look, if you've ever seen gay Pride Day parades in New York City or San Francisco, which would never be allowed in Salt Lake City. We're not going to have naked men walking down the street, Main Street in Salt Lake City, without the police definitely being involved with it, so they don't even try. We have nearly naked men walking down this Main Street in Salt Lake. But they're not only naked, they're doing things. Just let your imagination handle that. And so this was the other big thing, not the increasing weaponry production taking place in Germany that makes Germany a Russian target. It was an absolute travesty, I think, to say that the Christopher Street Day values are those of the symptoms of a free democratic society. If people want to be that perverse, and I'm not going to tell you what I saw in a couple of pictures, they should hide it in their bedroom, because it was one of the accomplishments of the modern times to keep private activity and public affairs separate. In the Middle Ages, this wasn't necessarily the case. And now we're obviously returning to many aspects of the Middle Ages in terms of these values. In any case, it is a huge uproar in Germany. Now, do you remember by any chance, if you studied the early days of Nazi Germany, what the first thing Hitler did when he became chancellor? He banned all of that behavior. He closed down the Berlin whorehouses. He closed down the Berlin pornography shops and publishing facilities. Now, I'm not saluting Hitler. I'm just saying Berlin has had a problem with this in the ages past. And the first thing that Hitler did on the day he became chancellor was to clean this crap up out of Berlin. Because Berlin at that time was known as, well, you can't say the San Francisco of Europe, but that's kind of what it was. And it's sad that I have to use an American city as an example. Anyway, I've only got a few minutes left here, because if you were listening from the beginning, I said I have to leave at 11:45. I've got a very important meeting I need to keep before I see patients at 10. And then one other big topic I want to mention, simply because my son is now living in Spain, is that Spain and France, you have what may very well be the largest forest fires in their history. They're both uncontrolled. One is a fire front near Madrid, getting closer to Madrid, which has already destroyed an extremely large area. I think the largest ever, if I read the news correctly, which is already the largest. And also another firewall that's approaching the Bordeaux region in France. And many people already having to be evacuated, and the ability to fight the fire is severely reduced because in the case of Spain, because of their sanctions against Russia, Spain cannot use the extremely efficient Russian firefighting helicopters that are far in advance of ours because they're not able to maintain them. They can't get the spare parts. So they're all sitting on the ground while their country's burning down. I mean, it's the height of insanity. Thankfully, the fire situation in our state, especially the Cottonwood fire, is now being fought by locals because it's almost all contained. Anyway, as I said when I started the program today, I do this because I think these things need to be said. I'm not trying to change anybody. I'm not trying to get anybody to think the way I think. I just believe that I need to be aware of what's going on this planet because it's going to affect my grandchildren. If I didn't have any grandchildren, I'd be worried about your grandchildren and what is coming down the pike. Now, the most serious thing I think Utah's facing right now is not just the economy, which may well be the most serious thing. Gas prices are going to go up. Interest rates are going to go up. Your value of your silver and gold is going to go down. But when I see the congressional delegation, the representative I voted for because I'm in his area, and the two senators I voted for because I'm in their state, linking hands with this tiny little country, stirring up all kinds of hell in the Middle East, and sharing armed forces and turning a portion of our armed forces over to Israeli command. I just about go berserk. You know, tomorrow is going to be a health program. And I want to talk about what is the correct kind of water you should be drinking. If you were in Qatar right now, I'd probably say, well, start off with that desalination water. And then we want to add some minerals and a few things. But here, where we still have measures that we can underscore or undertake for the benefit of our families, there is something that a friend of mine proposed that I want to mention to you in the sense of what is the proper kind of water to drink. All right, now normally I take it Tuesday morning to the top of the hour for Lowell to take over. I'm going to stop my transmission and play what was playing there before. Lowell can take care of it when his show begins. And be sure to listen to Lowell. Really good, rich content on his program. So I'm going to stop the recording now, and we'll save it under today's date. For those of you who are on the stream, thank you for your attention. Like and subscribe if you would to keep the numbers growing. They are growing. And I'll be back tomorrow with a health program. Other things I want to talk about, but principally, what kind of water should you be drinking? I mean, you walk through the grocery stores now and there's 20, 30 different bottles of water. What really makes sense? What does your body really need in the sense of clean water? I'll talk about that tomorrow. So I'm going to end the stream. Thank you for